Hey kids, today we're going to talk about Little Inferno, specifically about the themes and narrative of the game. That is to say, some junk I made up to sound like a faux intellectual. Before we do that though, I'd like to provide an overview for anyone who hasn't played it. Released by Tomorrow Corporation in 2012, the game allows you to relive the emotions of your ancient Neanderthal ancestors by finding great amusement in the incineration of various objects. From the very beginning of the game, you are assured that Little Inferno is not a regular video game, and that yes, the only objective is to purchase items from consumer catalogs and then burn them in your Little Inferno trademark fireplace. As you can imagine, the game is very simple. Everything is controlled with the mouse, and the game takes place on 2 screens for the majority of playtime. The gameplay loop is also really easy to get down, and consists thusly. First, burn objects in your fireplace to earn money. Spend that money on more items. Burn them as well. Get letters that expand the lore and scope of the unseen world. Burn them as well. Buy more items to burn in special combos that will net you stamps that can be used to instantly deliver items to you. Unlock new catalogs of items and more inventory space. Burn the new items. Experience psychological and existential horror as the neighbor kid makes weird noises and sends you increasingly morose letters. Burn them as well. While simple in concept, and ultimately a game about watching a fireplace, Little Inferno still manages to remain engaging. Part of the interest comes from unlocking each new item, and then finding out what happens when it is burned. Many have unique and humorous effects, along with satirical descriptions. Further, the combo system adds small riddles that are both fun and reward you for solving them by helping to speed up the gameplay, which can otherwise be a bit slow. Even when the game does slow down, Tomorrow Corporation's unique, mangled doll art style makes the game interesting to look at while you wait. It would be difficult to discuss the rest of the game without talking about the plot, so I think I'll just go ahead and do that now. Spoilers for the entire game from here. Shortly after immolating the terms and conditions, you are contacted by Miss Nancy, the head of the mysterious mega conglomerate and delivery service Tomorrow Corporation. As you have already burned everything in your possession, she gives you a brand new catalog of goods to set alight so that you can keep playing. Shortly after, you receive a letter from Sugar Plums, an excitable girl who is later revealed to be your next door neighbor. She sends you a photo of her, and you get off to a warm start. Lastly, you meet the weatherman. He's kind enough to spend money on postage to tell you that it's cold as my dead heart outside, because the one screen you play on doesn't have any windows. You burn time and objects for quite a bit, all throughout getting letters from the 3 characters. Sugar Plums will ask you to send her items, and upon fulfilling her requests, will send you things back, like a heart, drapes for your fireplace, and the gift of life. That stuff takes up my inventory slots though, so... As you progress through the catalogs, Sugar Plum's letters become more curious of the limited world around her. SP has a very whimsical attitude and is very happy to express her creativity. She is quite excited to talk about how eons old space particles created a ham sandwich, or how a blank piece of paper can be filled with possibilities. Such youthful curiosity and naivete is bound to run into trouble when she begins to question the nature of her Little Inferno fireplace. It's only natural that in a place as cold and isolated as this, one would begin to wonder about the outside world, and further, why you know so little about it. At least Sugar Plums has the player to confide in their existential dread. Oh. She's fine. So Miss Bezos shows up and gives you the, well, gee shucks, that wasn't supposed to happen spiel, and you're just supposed to go on playing like the only other child you ever knew didn't just get flame broiled like some retrospectively pretty apparent foreshadowing predicted they would. You continue to burn stuff, eventually reaching the catalog for alpha males featuring low self-esteem action figures and actual aerial ordnance when you're interrupted by the weatherman who reminds you that your friend is hella dead, and by Miss Nancy who applauds you for continuing to help her make money. But then, surprise! I lived, bitch! Sugar Plums apparently gazed pretty hard into the abyss after she burned alive, so she asked that you send her some sunglasses. See? She's fine. Well, not really fine, inasmuch that she's now speaking pretty vaguely about things that happened previously as if they were years ago, and acts as though she's a ghost back from the grave to take you with her. She very mysteriously instructs you to burn a magnet, fireflies, a toy exterminator, and sunglasses all at the same time, so that you can burn down your house. All of these items hold a special significance, as these were the items that you sent to her through the mail throughout your playthrough. Normally, I would think that burning my house down through voodoo ritual at the behest of a girl who I thought was dead 20 minutes ago would be a bad idea, but as I am out of catalogs and combos, I suppose there is nothing better to do. Who atted me in general chat? I'm fine. See, well, maybe not. Well, this is it. The outside world. Tim Burton is gonna sue somebody when he's done filing that lawsuit against himself. The weatherman wasn't lying. It really do be cold out here. You meet the mailman, the person responsible for delivering every object and letter you've received in the game. Apparently, every package was delivered right next to you as you sat in front of the little Inferno. You literally just never turned around as the mailman came in. He hands you one last letter from Sugar Plums before he leaves to make his rounds. Sugar Plums reminisces about the times the two of you had, and encourages you to go find the world that is waiting in the great unknown, but also to be cautious, as there is no turning back. From there, you stumble upon Tomorrow Corporation HQ, where after some chit-chat with a gatekeeper and a secretary, you come to the office of Miss Nancy. She reverberates a similar message to Sugar Plums, that there is a whole world out there for the taking, and no going back from where you came. She bemoans that she wasn't able to do all that she wanted in her life, but still holds out hope for her future. Then, Miss Bezos gets in her big fuck-off rocket ship and departs from the cold world she helped create. With that, you leave Tomorrow Corporation and encounter the Weatherman, who offers you a one-way trip to the end credits. All of that was basically a paraphrased version of the plot, which means we can now move on to our next section, a series of incoherent ramblings I wrote down while inhaling trash can fumes. You may have played or heard of some of Tomorrow Corporation's other games, like World of Goo or Human Resource Machine. Both of these games contain pro-environment and anti-corporate themes, so it should come as no surprise to find that Little Inferno is not an exception to this trend. These themes are most visible in the game's setting. In case it was not readily apparent, our mega business stand-in is the Tomorrow Corporation, a mysterious company who simultaneously seems to be responsible for everything, and yet is given very little backstory or surrounding information. This conundrum is exemplified quite well at the end of the game by the receptionist, who bounces off any and all questions you have regarding TC off of an impenetrable wall of customer service. What we do know about the Tomorrow Corporation comes largely from the fine line of products that come shipped to the fireplace. TC apparently has the resources to commodify a great variety of things for domestic use, such as live animals, cloning factories, miniature nuclear armaments, and small celestial bodies that would otherwise have giant ethical or safety problems associated with them, let alone the practical difficulties of getting them to work in the first place. Descriptions for these items are also reminiscent and satirical of department store taglines, and the grim appearance of some of the toys are not dissimilar to that of knockoff goods that are fabricated on the cheap. Even the music for the catalog screen is a very chintzy, happy-go-lucky melody that sounds like it should be playing in a mall someplace. It seems that Tomorrow Corp is able to skirt by the normal limitations of production because of an unseen power that they hold. Stamps are emblazoned with TC's Sunshine logo, and a local bank shares the same branding, which appears to imply that Tomorrow owns far more than just a manufacturing and delivery service. This ridiculous level of consolidated corporate power is kind of necessary for the game to exist, when you consider that Little Inferno is a losing investment. Under what circumstances is it profitable to ship customers items exclusively for the purpose of destroying them, and then give them more money for doing so in return? TC would either have to make so much money that such a stunt would have virtually no impact on their total revenue, or so much manufacturing surplus that it is more profitable on their end to have average consumers burn their rejected or excess waste than to dispose of it themselves. The origins of Little Inferno are never explained, but it comes across to me almost as if it was conceived as a brilliant loophole designed to avoid taxes or environmental regulations. Speaking of environmental hazards, another large facet of Little Inferno's world is the continually mentioned and little elaborated encroaching cold. For all of the Weatherman's dialogue, even less is revealed about the climate of the world in the Tomorrow Corporation.
But I thought playing with fire was dangerous.
Well, you're right. But up out of your chimney, way up in the sky, it's been snowing for years, and we just don't know why. Our world is getting colder. But there's no need for alarm. Just sit by your fire, burn all of your toys, and stay warm.
My dude, that doesn't rhyme! Several characters mention that the temperature outside has been dropping for longer than anyone can remember, and the snow seems to fall endlessly from the sky. For as powerful as CEO Miss Nancy is, even she doesn't seem to know when or why the snow began falling. Miss Nancy does theorize that the temperature drop will slow the city down until it eventually freezes completely, however. Whether she means the end of all humanity from exposure, or the inability to deal with the ever-growing isolation and depression from being locked alone in their homes, is up to interpretation. Either way, she isn't sticking around to find out.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
With such little information to go on, I don't think it would be good to draw any hard and fast conclusions about Little Inferno's backstory. No doubt the game intends to be purposely vague and elicit more emotions than story beats or direct messages. Still, there is something to be said about a world featuring an omnipresent and omnipotent corporation capable of doing and making anything it wants, unless that thing is finding out why it keeps getting colder outside. Like, it's a little weird that you can sell me Pluto complete with gravitational orbit, but you can't tell me why it won't stop snowing, or why that snow looks like ash.
We just don't know why.
I think the idea that Tomorrow Corporation probably had something to do with the climate catastrophe present in Little Inferno becomes more plausible when you consider Tomorrow Corporation's, that is to say the game company's, previous title World of Goo, which leans heavily on the environmentalist themes. That game is effectively about leading oil balls into a machine to be harvested for their use in consumable products. Well, also there was that part where Miss Bezos left in her escape rocket after she said the world was going to freeze. That was a little suspicious.
But you got things you have to do now, and so do I. And so, I'm gonna get on this spaceship.
Of our three principal characters in Little Inferno, Sugar Plums is our secondary protagonist. Miss Nancy and the Weatherman do correspond with you through letters as SP does, but it is mostly for world building or mood setting rather than driving the plot forward. At first glance, Sugar Plum's personality is very early internet. There's a lot of caps lock and elongated words, very I can has cheeseburger, that sort of thing. Supposedly this is because her delete key on her keyboard is broken, but it may also be because she's quite young. This may be annoying for some players, especially since she sends you letters pretty frequently and also demands you send her things. To me though, it comes off less as a bratty kid looking for attention, but more like a very young and curious mind who is quite excited to be able to have a friend. In a world of two screens, the feeling of coldness and isolation is heavily felt. You can only stare deep into the fire pit, unable to even turn around. Sugar Plums is likely in the same situation you are in, cold and alone. So being able to talk and know someone is on the other side of the wall must give her great comfort and make her feel excited to share things. All in all, you get the impression that she isn't perhaps the brightest, but is quite enthusiastic. As I played through Little Inferno again, one concept that came to mind when thinking about the interactions between Sugar Plums and the player was Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I'll give a really brief and oversimplified version of what that is here, both because it will be relevant to what I'll say in a minute or two, and because I don't expect you to know what this one Greek philosopher said over 2,000 years ago. So Plato was this ancient Greek philosopher who, among other things, came up with this thought experiment where you chain up prisoners since childhood at the bottom of a dark cave and force them to look at a wall. Supposing you were to light up that wall and project shadows onto it, the prisoners would assume the shadows of a real versions of what being projected. Since they have spent most if not all of their life in that cave, they wouldn't know any better. Plato also presumes that if one of the prisoners were to be freed, he would not willingly exit the cave, as the lie is much more comfortable and makes more sense at that point. However, if the prisoner was dragged kicking and screaming into the outside world and forced to receive some temporary blindness because the sun really hurts his eyes, they would eventually come to the realization that the outside world is better. They would then go back into the cave, this time not to return to the lie, but instead to drag out the other prisoners and bring them to the enlightened state that comes from leaving the cave. Plato's allegory of the cave can be interpreted in a variety of ways, whether it be in relation to the value of education or how the physical form of something only reveals so much about its true reality, but to be honest, I'm not really interested in talking about that, and there are far more qualified people to discuss that on this site. Instead, let's return to the game. I bring up the allegory of the cave because there are some interesting parallels between the story and Little Inferno. As in the allegory, from the very start we are locked in, staring at the wall of our fireplace, unable to even turn around. We burn our commercialized goods of artificial meaning, bathed in the light of the flaming embers. The fireplace is our entire world. Were it not for the letters we receive, we would not have any evidence to suggest that other people even exist. However, others do exist. Sugar Plums is in the same condition we are, a fellow prisoner, and through her profound curiosity, she accidentally frees herself from her chains and ascends. Her burning is not just because it's really hot and it hurts, but also from the temporary blindness of seeing the light at the cave's mouth, the pain of moving from one state of knowing to the next. Lastly, knowing that you will not willingly leave the comfort of your warm fireplace, Sugar Plums tricks you into creating a combination that forces you into the outside world, and into the light. Knowing that that her one friend has seen the truth and is finally free to make their own decisions allows SP to finally have peace and get a killer tan at the beach, brah! I think it's possible to see Sugar Plums as a crazy person whose completely comic and manic actions save the day, or a dumb kid whose childlike innocence is meant to be the solution to a cold industrial world's problems. I'd like to think that she's wiser beyond her years, though. After all, she had been asking you for the ingredients for the death combo since almost the very start. Perhaps it's possible that she had wanted to leave for a long time before she met you, and was just finally given the opportunity. I've talked an awful lot of nonsense over the past several minutes regarding the various gags I've misinterpreted to be deeper themes, and how I think some lolcats user secretly relates to some ancient Greek philosopher or whatever, but I think if there's one thing the game wants you to hear for sure, it's this. There's a whole world out there. You can go as far as you want, but you can never go back. I know it wants you to hear this because it tells you that
1,000 times.
This quote is reverberated by other sentiments given throughout the game, like when Sugar Plums and the mailman note that you are seemingly physically incapable of turning around, and when both Miss Nancy and SP comment about how rapidly time has flown by. It is true. Time moves ever forward, and stops for no one. Regardless of whether you feel your life is being well spent or completely wasted, the clock keeps ticking all the same. You can never relive the memories you have, be the person you once were, or live in the time that once was. You can only look forward. You cannot turn around. I think it is possible that Little Inferno wishes to point an accusatory finger at the player, particularly those who spend a lot of time on the computer or around their screens. It's as if the game wants you to know that you have the potential to go and do anything you want, but even if you choose to do so, you'll never be able to get back the time you've lost gazing into your screen or fireplace. The first time I played the game, I sort of ended up interpreting the fireplace as one big metaphor for my computer screen. There's this one line where Sugar Plum states that Little Inferno was designed to not matter, and I couldn't help but think of every video game I had played not for enjoyment, but just to burn time, and if I could have been doing something better instead. The developers of Little Inferno themselves seem to agree with this idea, with Kyle Gabler stating in an interview for Beef Jack in 2012, "There's a simple idea that everything hangs off of in the game. It's that feeling that you've been spending your time doing something silly and unproductive, but that once you realize it, you always have the option to burn it all down and move on. There's a gut-wrenching kicker in there though, but you can never get that time back. We chose to illustrate that by making a satire of crappy games that knowingly waste your time for insulting, hollow rewards, but it just as easily could have been about a dead-end job or a numb relationship or many other things." As I've grown older and more detached from video games, I think I've come to appreciate that message more. It seems less condescending to me now, and feels more like a cautious warning about what you choose to do with your limited lifespan, and that there is so much more to the world beyond our usual comforts. It's also possible that the game is stating in a heightened state of awareness, it's impossible to return to a more comfortable time when ignorance was bliss. Still, with more knowledge comes more possibilities, so while the world is colder than it once was, it is also infinitely more open. As you reach the weatherman on the windswept cliff, he informs you that for the first time in a long time, the sun will emerge. It's unclear whether the sun is setting or rising. I suppose it's up for you to decide. You may not be able to go back, or to turn around, but you can always change your course. And as long as you keep moving forward, the future burns bright.